But it's so funny. Like some of the people I've bought deals with 8 years ago, now they want to sell. Who's the first person they call? I think we forget about that in this business. It's not a transaction business. It's a relationship business.
Today, we are pleasured to sit down with Logan Rankin. Logan came here from across the state in the Green Bay area. Logan owns over 4,000 rental units himself, no partners, no investors. That's over $500 million in portfolio value. All of that was accomplished within the past 11 years, I believe. He's achieved financial freedom by age 30. He has over 100 full-time employees in his organization. And he wrote a book that I've mentioned many times actually on this podcast and read and love, which is called Find Your Financial Freedom. So if you guys don't have that book, make sure to check it out. We'll talk a lot about the stuff that's in that book today. So thank you so much for being here today, Logan.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. I like what you guys do and who you've had on as guests, as we're just talking about. So excited to dig in.
Yeah, awesome. Well, tell us about your backstory in real estate. Why real estate versus traditional investments?
Like I grew up traditionally where, in school, it's not going to teach you anything about real estate or like how to get into real estate. And, as I started working in my Fortune 50 job and making more and more money, I came a point to like, well, what is this money doing for me, right? Like, how is this money working well for me? And I didn't know, like all I knew how to do, and I share this a lot, is you should spend less than you make and you should just put all that money into a 401k. And that's all I was doing, right? But it didn't seem like it was the only thing that you could do with your money. And I felt like I couldn't predict the earnings, and I certainly couldn't see it, until at least 59 and a half, right? So I just started reading books, and I knew that I wanted an investment that paid me today. And 401ks wasn't that thing. So I did try a lot of different things. I always tell people, like, I didn't just jump into real estate. Like, I had a 401k, I did a Roth IRA, but then I tried stocks and stuff. And then I was reading annual reports. I just wasn't Warren Buffett. Like I still like reading and looking at the P&Ls and stuff, but it was so tough to be able to predict like the earnings of the company or what it would actually do, because I realized it wasn't even on the earnings, right? Some of it's even emotional on how stocks do. And I didn't want that. Like I wanted to have more control. And you read enough personal finance books, you fall into real estate and you realize that a ton of the wealth is kept in real estate. So that's kind of like how I decided to get into it, by trying a little bit of everything else and just opening up my horizons. But I was scared. My wife and I saved up 2.5 years before we bought our first rental property, just to have enough money. And it's crazy because over that 2.5 years, if we would have just like put away month over month the amount of money we were putting in the 401k, I wouldn't have been as nervous, right? But it would be the same amount of money. But we did it, and we put in one lump sum into a single family rental and took that chance, and everything else changed after that.
So tell us about that first deal. What did that look like? What were you feeling at that time?
Yeah, I mean, after being scared, a little excited too, right? It was, I still own it. My wife won't let me sell it. I am not very emotional about real estate, but that is our first one. It's a single family house. It's in Appleton, Wisconsin. It's across from the golf course, so I bought in the right location. Bought it for, I think, just over $85,000. 3-bedroom, 1-bath, big backyard, garage. It's worth like $260,000 today. So, I mean, I wish I would have bought a lot more back then. But yeah, I mean, that experience was great. I underwrote the deal from what I read in a book. I actually didn't have any coaching. I didn't have any mentors. My parents were not wealthy. I didn't know anybody else in real estate. So everything that I've learned, a lot of it was either on the job experience or from books. And, I know that when you underwrite a deal, it doesn't always work out exactly like the book tells you or whatever. But this one did. I underwrote it, and it was supposed to cash flow like $3,600 or something. And it came like within a couple $100s of that. And it wasn't that much work. I was managing it myself. And I convinced my wife to do it because we would take a vacation if it did come in with that. But she was so psyched, and I was so pumped with it too. We ended up taking that money and then the money we saved over the course of the year. And then the next year we bought a duplex. So we doubled. We bought 2 units. And we kind of did the same thing, right? That first rental went pretty good. There's things that went wrong, but you just like learn through it. And the first 3 years, we ended up having 7 rental properties and doing a really good job. And then after the 7 units, we turned over our portfolio to a third-party management company. And we kind of did that from about 7 units to 250 units. So continued to grow, had a good, I would say, a overall good property management company compared to which I feel lucky these days because compared to a lot of the other property management companies I could have picked, I think that could have been bad. And really started growing it. But the same way, right? We just saved up all of our money. We're very conscious of what we were spending, and we lived on very little. And we put all that excess money into real estate. And I was much more aggressive. Like, people see my unit count today and they think like, man, like that's crazy, like how much he was. I was more aggressive and more leveraged and took way more risk my first 5 years than my last 5 years. We literally I'd take all the money that we saved. Literally, it'd be like nothing left. At one point, there was $7 in my bank account in like the first like 5 to 7 units that we had just to acquire these properties. So very little left. But, as my book talks about, my wife and I felt really good about understanding our financial situation, how much we needed to live, when the next paychecks would be able to come in. And with very little units and being so young, those were risks we were willing to take.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. That's great. So, like looking at your timeline of buying real estate, you talked about the first 3-4 years, it was only 7 properties.
Yeah.
And then you went from 50 to 100, 100 to 250, 250 to 500. Like, was there a singular deal that was a turning point for you that infused a bunch of cash to be able to allow you to grow, or a mindset shift? Or what was that turning point that allowed you to continue to double year after year?
Yeah. Before I answer that question, this will make more sense. So my first decade in business wasn't real estate. It was actually working in a Fortune 50 company. I worked for Target Corporation, and I was in the leadership. And I was not good at a lot of things, but I was really good at 3 things. And these, I want to share these with you because these 3 things that I spent a decade learning, making mistakes, and developing will answer your question. I started realizing I was really good at leadership. I loved reading leadership books. I played college basketball. Even early in my college basketball career, I got to be captain of the team. I just understood that it's like how to get an entire team motivated, moving toward the one direction. Not just me, an entire team. I always was promoting my team members that worked for me. I was always dedicated. So that leadership thing, and mind you, I made a lot of mistakes in leadership too. Like, I was young when I had a lot of responsibility right after college. So to be able to learn how to fire somebody, how to hire somebody. I mean, I probably have done over 5,000 interviews, how to develop and promote somebody. Those things were really monumental for me once I got into real estate. I started to realize that I'm naturally good at processes. Like, I continued to get promoted because I could see an operational process that was broke, and I could develop a system or a routine. And I really leaned into that. I read books. I asked people on the job that were much higher than me at a Fortune 50 company, like how they looked at processes. And people that are a lot smarter than me really helped me with that journey. Like, everybody thinks you just write down a step-by-step in an operation project, but it's so much more than that. It's thinking about how to clearly explain it to the audience that is going to be running the process, or how to tie a scoreboard so they're motivated by it, or how to make this sure that they understand the incentive for them, not just the incentive that you're designing the process for. Like, these sound simple, but are very complicated things. And as I leaned into those, that helped me get promoted more too. And then the last thing is I just realized I was really good at a P&L. Like, I could figure out not only how to lead a team or put processes in place, but most importantly, how to drive more profit through people and through process. And once I figured that out, like, I was obsessed with it. Like, my wife makes fun of me, but like on a Saturday, like, I'm nerding out over a random company's P&L. Like, I was looking at WD-40's P&L, which has done like a 32% cash on cash every single year over the last decade. It's nuts, but that's what I do for fun. Like, I love looking at numbers, and you find a lot about a company. So now, to answer your question, I just want to give that background to the audience, because once it started, my second decade was real estate. But I had that background. And what changed for me is when I first started buying real estate, I already told you this, I started buying real estate because I just wanted I wanted a place to put my money that paid me now. Like, that's all I really knew. I didn't know about, like, I didn't even look at appreciation or the tax benefits. I just wanted cash flow today because I wanted to achieve financial freedom sooner. So I'm buying properties. And you said, what changed for me? Well, it was then very next year, I bought 2 4-units. Which was great, right? That got me over the 1 to 2 unit mark. And then the year after that, I bought my first apartment. And up until that time, I would tell everybody, I'm just buying properties, that cash flow. But something changed when I bought my first apartment. I started to realize that these weren't properties. These were businesses. That was monumental for me because I started looking at properties as businesses now, businesses that have real customers that you want to treat well, but they also have operating income and operating expenses. They have P&Ls. And just like a Target store and just like a normal business, the more profitable that business, the more valuable it was. That singular thing changed for me because I realized that like, hey, we're in Wisconsin, right? This isn't like San Francisco or the East Coast of West Coast, or even in the Sun Belt. Although I would tell you those areas probably want to be in the Midwest these days.
Yeah.
But like, there isn't such a thing as great appreciation here. But there is opportunities to force appreciation. And you can do that by buying businesses, which I now called my apartments, and figuring out how to drive more profit. So that's what changed for me because now I started looking at opportunities. I'm like, how is this guy running his business, not his property? And what are the telltale signs of things where I feel he's mismanaging it? Or at least opportunities where I could take his business, let's call it business A, to business B, and in doing so, create a lot of profitability. And that allowed me to be able to scale because as you mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, I think there's a lot of people that worked really, really hard at finding money to buy deals. I already told you to start. I didn't know anybody with money. My family doesn't have any money. My friends didn't have any money. So like instead of me putting my time into figuring out how to find the money was in the business. So I put all my time into figuring out how to make my business more valuable so that I could refi my money back out. And that's what I did. In the beginning, I bought an apartment that was mismanaged, that was off market, that wasn't doing really well. And then I worked really, really hard to be able to make that business more profitable and make it more valuable so that the debt service credit ratio would be a lot higher. And then a bank or a lender felt very comfortable being able to refi my money back out, tax-free, by the way. I mean, a lot of people think I knew what I was doing. I didn't even know. I'm like, wait a second, you're going to give me money, all my money back that I put into this?
Yep.
And it's tax-free? And then my accountant goes, you can write off the mortgage interest. So profits could actually be more tax efficient because you can write off mortgage interest. I think a lot of people these days talk about don't be over leveraged, don't be over leveraged. And you're right. I mean, that can be scary. So you shouldn't be over leveraged. But not a lot of people talk about you shouldn't be under leveraged either. Like if you're too under leveraged, your cash flow is really, really strong. Therefore, you're going to be paying taxes, right? So I think it's a happy balance depending on where you are. And I knew I really wanted to scale. Well, maybe now, my portfolio is just over a 58% LTV, so I'm a lot less leveraged than I once was. But when you're growing and you're scaling and you're young, yeah, don't be over leveraged. But man, you want to push that needle as much as possible, be as tax efficient to really, really grow. And honestly, once I realized it was a business, I also knew in a business you want to be as tax efficient as possible too, right? Mm-hmm. So
when I heard you speak in Milwaukee last time we met. One big thing that stuck out to me is you're like, so many people are focused on loan to value of your portfolio, but they're not focused on cash return. And like in my head, when do you refi? It's when you're at this loan to value, but you said it's when you're at a certain cash on cash return is when you should consider taking money out.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that more?
Yeah. Loan to value. I realized that used to be a big topic that everybody looked at. I could care less. Like I could care less what my net worth is or what my assets are valued at. Because what really matters is how much is your net worth producing in cash flow. And for banks too, like they learned that lesson in 2008, 2009. I realized I wasn't in real estate through then, but I studied it a lot. I know a lot of people that have been through a few real estate cycles. So even though I haven't been, it doesn't mean we can't learn from it. And a lot of banks and a lot of people just looked at loan to value. But like right now I'm at a 60%. If values fall 40%, like what is my loan to value? Like that's not great, right? But if my cash flow stays the same, I can still cover my debt. So what I was saying, Austin, is that the debt service credit ratio that banks typically look for is a 120%. Or 1.2. So knowing that you have 20% more cash flow to be able to pay for debt, and they qualify that as safe. Obviously, if you're in a refi position, you're much higher than that. Like I finished 2023 at 168% DSCR, right, on my portfolio, which tells me I have a lot of opportunity if I wanted to be able to refi. And I think if you pay attention to the cash flow, not only does it tell you where you can take out more debt or not take out more debt, helps you understand the safety margins and the risk that you have as well too. Because again, values can change, and values honestly are very speculative of who's doing the appraisal, what time of year it is, are interest rates going up or down, like.
Is the appraiser in a good mood or bad mood?
Yeah, right? But the debt service credit ratio that doesn't change is what is your debt and how much is your property cash flowing? Like there's nothing to speculate about that. So I really like that. It's the number one thing I pay attention to, or one of my biggest KPIs is like, I'm going to buy a mismanaged property so I know the debt service credit ratio is crap. Like, I'm lucky if it's a 1.0 at this point, right? So you're taking a pretty big risk because there's nothing left over. But the only reason you take that risk is because you see an opportunity to significantly increase the cash flow, therefore pushing the debt service credit ratio. Like a lot of times I can literally double my debt service credit ratio. If it's 100%, I should be able to get that to 200% if I'm buying the type of property that I've bought over the last decade.
So it sounds like that first property was a multifamily. How many units was that first?
12 units was the first apartment.
12 unit. And then did you decide, hey, I'm only buying multifamily after that point, or were you still buying onesies and twosies? Or
pretty much.
Okay.
I still had a few. I mean, honestly, I think it's just under 4,100 units. I would say 200 of those are still somewhere between 1 to 4 units.
Okay.
It's the only way using my own capital that I could build. So anything after that, though, is like a portfolio. So if someone's going to sell 50 units, I'm fine buying a few duplexes or single families here.
Yeah.
Or sell me a 36 unit and a duplex, I'd buy out their whole portfolio. So, but mostly multifamily from there on out.
Okay. Early on, like, where were you finding these deals? That's the problem with most people, and that's usually the bottleneck of the operation is finding the deal, right? So how did you find those deals early on?
Yeah, a lot of different ways. I have an acquisitions team now, thankfully, and they're calling 24/7, right? Back then, it was just me. So I did a lot of things. So I think one of the easiest things investor can do is tell as many people as you can. Get laser focused on your criteria. It's like, what are you trying to buy? So for me, I knew it was mismanaged value-add properties. There's got to be something wrong with the property, but I wanted it in a good location. So like I would look for things that were in spring, May and June. If the landlord hasn't cut the grass and it's like at waist height, he's probably pretty tired. The tenants aren't probably happy. That's a telltale sign of mismanaged property. I would tell pest exterminators, right? So they would go across and they would see a ton of cockroaches like in a building. I know this sounds gross, but like for me, like I know like it's not that hard to get rid of bugs, but that's opportunity, right? Because maybe they haven't figured it out. As long as that location's strong, right? My brother-in-law's a police officer, so he knows a lot of police officers. Well, guess what police officers unfortunately get to do, right? They have to go handle tough situations, crime on property. They understand where the evictions are coming from. So I tell as many police officers as I could. Like I wanted to buy the apartment complexes that had the drug dealers, that had the crime, that had the people, because at my scale in the beginning, I couldn't be choosy. Like I wish I could just buy A-class properties, but A, that wasn't very profitable. B, I didn't have the money for it. So I had to buy problems. So that's how I started out, is I started telling everybody, I will buy your problems. And then I will figure out how to give solutions, right? I think there's a lot of people that don't like problems. Problems are where you make the most of your money. Like every very successful person I know has solved problems in the marketplace. And that's what I set out to do. There's been at least a half dozen people that I've paid a finder's fee more than a year's worth of their W-2 job. Like, so, I mean, I've given finder's fee. I give $250,000 finder's fee before. So I also pay really, really well. If you find me a great deal, right, I need to look at the deal first. Like if it's an average deal, it's probably an average finder's fee. But if it's an above average deal, nobody pays more than me. So I started getting a reputation like, if we give the Logan the deal, like before we even list it, I've had plenty of agents convince the sellers that like, this is the guy to be able to get it to. No, not just because of the money. The other thing I think a lot of investors make a mistake at these days is they don't have the experience to close the deal or the conviction to close the deal. So like him and ha over it. That kills deals. I found deals because if you send me the deal, I was going to underwrite it and get you back with an offer within 24 to 48 hours. These days, investors are taking 2 to 4 weeks, right? So then list it afterwards. At least I'm going to get you an answer in 1 to 2 days. And then I've closed 100% of my deals, Austin. So like, if you think about somebody that has acquired and been in the game as long as I have, it is very difficult to get through the inspection and the due diligence and still close the deal. But I wanted to be known as a closer. So I think where I'm going towards the end of this, you want to find deals by telling a lot of people, paying really well, they bring it, but most of all, develop a reputation to being easy to work with and closing deals. Then those relationships continue to come back to you. Like somebody asked me this before, somebody new on my team, maybe earlier this week, actually. She said, it seems like you've bought a lot of deals from the same people. Yeah. If I had to put a percentage on it, I would say 30% of my deals in general of 4,100 units came from I bought the first deal with this guy, right? The seller. And now the seller sold me. Most real estate investors don't have one property. True? How many real estate investors do you know that don't also know somebody that owns real estate?
None. Yeah.
Yeah, right? Like, we like to talk about our real estate.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like, we like to, you're on an airplane,
sure.
like, you see someone that's doing real estate, you like to talk about real estate. So these guys know. So I just made it so certain that I am going to make this the best transaction this person has ever had. And now, if he did own any other properties, why would he not come back to me? And if he has any friends or family, why would he not tell them about the transaction? So when they sold, so it didn't happen right away, but it's so funny. Like some of the people I bought deals with 8 years ago, now they want to sell. Who's the first person they call? I think we forget about that in this business. It's not a transaction business. It's a relationship business.
Yeah, I hope you guys are listening to this. I mean, the two things that you've said, I know I have two deals in my head. One of them is the one we talked about before the show of a guy hemming and hawing for 2 weeks and an offer. I looked at the property, had him an offer that night, and it was accepted the next morning.
It's awesome.
And that I learned from you. A second time and bought an 8-unit from a land contract for sale by owner. Transaction went so well, she had another one down the street. She gave me first dibs on it. And that's going to result in millions of dollars, those two deals, just from little stuff like that and doing the little things right. So,
yeah.